comment. The Canadian Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, Dr. Robert Milano.
Thank you. Apart from being the clinical director for the Adolescent Day Treatment Unit, I am also the head of the Division of Addiction and Mental Health for the University of Ottawa and associate professor at the University of Ottawa and Department of Psychiatry. I speak to you as a representative from the Canadian Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. We don't have necessarily an official position on this, so these are essentially talking points, and I hope not to repeat my esteemed colleagues here and some of their important information. You know, we have to stipulate that this is a complex matter. You know, there may not be right or wrong here. It may be deciding how do we best approach it, recognizing that we may need to revisit the way we do something. We are well aware of the adverse effects of marijuana use in adolescents. This is well established, not an issue to be really discussed much, to be honest with you. It's overwhelming evidence. Even back when I started my residency as an addiction psychiatrist in the 1990s, we had very good evidence, you know, about its impact. In that days, we called it, you know, substance use, but it was typically alcohol and marijuana. The potential negative consequences of short and long-term use of what we determine as recreational marijuana, which we actually don't know what that means, is well documented across multiple life domains, including impact on cognitive abilities, mental health, mental disorders, and in meeting the developmental tasks and challenges of adolescents, and specifically academic and vocational functioning, as well as something that has gone unsaid here, as well as contributing to the unintentional deaths and injuries among adolescents who drive and use marijuana. An earlier age of onset of marijuana use increases the risk of negative outcomes. So obviously onset in adolescence, as you heard earlier, particularly before the age of 16. However, it is still a risk factor as you move forward up to at least age 21. Including development of substance use disorders other than cannabis, psychotic illness, and other mental disorders. Marijuana use negatively impacts response to treatment of mental disorders in adolescents, as well as adults. Cannabis is not a benign substance, and especially for the vulnerable populations such as youth, children, and adolescents. We must remember that legalization of cannabis may very likely increase the already high prevalence of marijuana use by adolescents in Canada. We've already heard about those statistics. Drug use disorders are actually more common than alcohol use disorders in adolescents based on U.S. statistics. This is because of the overrepresentation of cannabis use disorder in adolescents and young adults. It is, in many respects, a unique drug of misuse for adolescents and young adults. We don't exactly understand why, but we recognize that that's what's really happening. There are no definitions for recreational or safe use of marijuana, unlike for alcohol. We have well-established guidelines that tell us how much you can drink a day, if you're a man or woman, how much is excessive drinking, what is binge drinking. These are well-established. And we have markers, other markers that we can look at. You cannot, you know, and continued regular recreational use of marijuana. So regular use simply means once a week, you know, has the increased likelihood of impairing one's ability to meet one's potential. So we must indicate that, you know, if you continue to use marijuana, you know, your potential as a person using marijuana may be impaired. There are enough longitudinal epidemiological studies that tell us that. As a group, that doesn't mean a particular individual may not become a rock star. We are aware that preference and regular daily use of marijuana are key markers for the risk of developing a cannabis use disorder in adolescence and through young adulthood. There are no evidence-based indications for the medical use of marijuana for mental disorders. It's a policy statement of the American Psychiatric Association, which I have the privilege of participating in, and even more so in a developing adolescent and young adult, especially with respect to recreational marijuana use. that does not mean cannabis or cannabinoids do not have potential, benefits and medical benefits. We have to study that. All drugs of abuse, or misuse have medical or medicinal benefit. That, as I want to say, thank God we have opioids for when you have an operation, It's the issue of how do we control that potential for misuse. The legalization of marijuana use will result in a very large business. This is a monster of a business in terms of economy-wise. And their push and slant on this issue will have in its impact on potency. We know that from California studies where medicinal assessment of medicinal marijuana has increased over time with the increase in THC. Because you come back, because you get a euphoric effect. And that's why the next guy next to him has a little higher dose. They go to him. He notices that. It's a business. Advertisement, payment, and even research must be recognized and its influence of the industry. A consistent message of potential harmfulness must be conveyed, especially for vulnerable populations like children and adolescents, and close monitoring of the cannabis industry. Laws governing cannabis use should mirror those of alcohol. They're very similar kind of substance. You don't want to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul. So if you're indicating that somehow marijuana is less harmful than alcohol, there is no evidence to support this kind of conjecture. It is, so the question comes down, how do you address this issue? How do you manage something like this? Is it legal for a minor to possess alcohol? And then is it legal for a minor to possess marijuana for recreational use? That's a complex question. I don't have the answer for you. That's why you guys are here, right? And we may have to revisit it. You may have to, because we recognize there are social determinants, and but we have to also look how many people are actually being charged for that, for minor possession. So I thank you, and we still have a lot to learn about marijuana and marijuana use over our lifespan.
Just ask one thing of you before I go to my colleagues, Dr. Malin. You're the only one that hasn't mentioned age. Did you have an age suggestion?
I have an age. I have an age that I'd like,
no,
but do I have a practical
I mean for
age?
For a legal age for
a legal age. Well, we believe, the Canadian Academy hasn't set a particularly legal age. We feel it should be similar to alcohol. We believe with the CPA that it should be 21. So we agree with them. From a pragmatic point of view, we know that this is going through. I was an expert on the council when they did the thing, and I said the same thing. From a practical point of view, you cannot divorce it and use it at 16, and you're setting a different. It has to be that I personally, say at least 19 would be the minimum age.
Okay.
The very minimum.
Thank you very much. All right, members of committee.